Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this TUC Organise 2020 event, which is Union Wins during the Covid-19 crisis. Before we begin the webinar today, and before I introduce our speakers, first of all, I have to just say one or two housekeeping things. But to introduce myself, I'm Tony Burke. I'm Assistant General Secretary of Unite the Union, and I'm very pleased to be chairing this webinar. We are going to be able to broadcast this later on. It will be videoed, but for those comrades that have come from outside of the UK, and I know there are a number of you, I have to say to you that the interpretation will be in English, and for Italian, and we do have Simone from Italy with us, you have to press the Russian interpretation to get Italian interpretation. Can I advise you as well that there will be muting during the webinar, and when it's our turn to speak from the panel, myself, they will be turned back on. If you've got any questions or comments to make, then you can do that through the question and answer, and they'll be sent through to me, and I'll try to get in as many speakers as questions as we possibly can. Now, I have to say that draw to your attention as well, it's already been posted on the chat, the TUC's Code of Conduct in regard to these webinars, and I would ask you to have a quick look when you get an opportunity at that, and ensure that we stay within the proper Code of Conduct that the TUC expects. Also, can I ask you to remain, all of the colleagues who are taking part, muted until we give you the indication that you can come in when your session is on. So without further ado, oh, and I should say, one of the problems, we've got three speakers. We've got Kate Bell from the TUC. We've also got Simone Marinelli from FIOM-CGIL in Italy, and Simone will be speaking, our good friend. And our third speaker is Keith Jacobs, who is the Regional Secretary of UNI, the Union Network International Global Union in Africa, a good friend of ours, Keith, but unfortunately we've just been notified that their internet connections are down in South Africa because of a storm in the Western Cape. Now, we're hoping that that storm subsides and we can get Keith on the call. I was looking forward to introducing him because he's a long-standing friend of mine. But I think we've got plenty of opportunity to talk about union wins during the COVID crisis. And I want to introduce my good friend and colleague, Kate Bell, who is Head of Rights, International Social and Economic Department of the TUC, who has been leading on the discussions with the UK government and done a fantastic job for us. And some of the things that were agreed by the government were down to Kate and her department in ensuring that we got heard and we got agreements with the government. So, Kate, I'm going to invite you to address the webinar now. We've got normally 7 minutes, but I think we might be able to allow a few minutes more if needs be. Kate, over to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Tony. Thanks to everybody for the invite, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in to listen to us today. I'm really speaking on behalf of my team, on behalf of the whole TUC, when I talk about what we've been able to achieve in this crisis and what more we've got to do. And the first thing I just wanted to say was there is absolutely no way I'm going to be able to do justice to the amazing work that unions have been doing across the country during this crisis. We know kind of in workplaces everywhere, in boardrooms everywhere, unions have been out there fighting for their members, and there is absolutely no way that in 7 minutes I can capture all of that. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you kind of in the questions about things you think I've missed. I was going to pick out a few workplace examples, but they're examples, they're not a kind of comprehensive assessment of everything that unions have been doing. And I guess I really wanted to kind of start by focusing on the positive, which, although this has been a terrible crisis with awful effects for working people, tragic effects, I think it is one that's really taught government how much they need unions. It showed them that unions are needed at workplace level to give people a voice in their workplace and raise their vital concerns, at sectoral level to help try and design solutions for whole industries, and at national level to bring the voice of workers into the heart of policy making. And I think that's really, really what we've seen during this period. I was going to pick out kind of 3 areas where I think we've shown just how important unions are, and then talk a little bit about what more we need to do to make sure that union voice gets recognised in the future. The most obvious thing that government has had to realise in this crisis is that unions are needed to keep people safe at work. Health and safety, kind of long derided in the UK as sort of, fussy, not important, has of course been thrown into the spotlight, and it's been shown just how important our health and safety reps are, and that realisation of workers actually being the people who are able to spot what's going wrong in the workplace has really been thrown into sharp relief during this crisis. We've seen deals done across whole sectors, so Usdaw worked with the British Retail Consortium to put in place new guidelines for workers to work safely in shops during the pandemic. All those people serving our food, which I think we all realised just how vital that role was during this period, made safer by the actions of unions. We've seen the needs of specific groups recognised. One I just picked out was a Unite agreement at UPS, recognising the particular needs of pregnant workers and ensuring that they could be off on full pay during the crisis. But also at the national level, the government had to listen to unions. And, this was a pretty hard fight, I think, to get the government's kind of back to work guidance in a place where it was even vaguely acceptable, intensive discussions, often at very short notice from government. But finally, and that guidance not perfect at all, but finally recognising that actually workers did need to be not only carrying out, but publishing a risk assessment, and huge amounts of work gone into designing that guidance, so it actually took into account the needs of specific groups, whether those are black workers who face disproportionate risks from working on the front line, disabled workers, pregnant workers. When unions started looking at that guidance, none of that had been recognised by government, and it took unions to make sure the needs of those groups were actually recognised. Next, and one of unions' absolutely core functions, we see just how important it is for unions to protect jobs. One of the most high-profile examples of this, of course, has been the introduction of the Job Retention Scheme in the UK. It's unlike most other European countries, we didn't previously have a scheme in place to support some form of short-time working, and trade unions started calling for it. When we started to realise, I don't think any of us realised what the nature of this crisis exactly was going to be, but we realised it was going to have a big hit on jobs, and many, many people could face redundancy as large parts of the economy shut down over March and April. Unions called for the Job Retention Scheme, and it was pretty notable that when the Chancellor announced it, the first people he thanked was the TUC, I think suggesting we did have a pretty important role in getting that over the line. But obviously our engagement didn't end there, so the scheme was announced, but pretty quickly became obvious that it was excluding millions of self-employed people. TUC held a round table with unions and the Chancellor to make the case for a self-employment scheme, and that was announced just a week later after the initial Job Retention Scheme announcement. Now, it's really important to note that these schemes are by no means perfect. They're not generous enough to those on the lowest pay. They've left out too many self-employed people. But I think we can be pretty clear that they're better because of the involvement that unions have had. We were able to negotiate the eventual move to allow people to come back to work part-time. We were able to negotiate so that union reps could do their job while they were on furlough. Initially, employers were saying, oh no, you can't come in and talk to us about health and safety because you're furloughed and you can't be doing any work. Unions pushed to get that change, and I think that was absolutely vital. And I think it's a pretty good achievement for the trade union movement to suggest that we have managed to help protect 9 million jobs. Now, this work is far, far from being done. Many of you will have watched the Chancellor's statement yesterday, which he called a plan for jobs, nicking some of the trade unions' language, but unfortunately not nicking enough of our policies. So we saw one positive note, a new, what the Chancellor's called a kickstart scheme, which is a new jobs programme for young people. That's something the TUC and our unions have been calling for since back in May, and something we really want to make sure actually works to deliver good quality jobs for young people. But we didn't see any help for the hardest hit sectors, no help for aviation, no help for retail, no help for manufacturing. We didn't really see the extension of the job retention scheme that might support those. We didn't see the structured engagement with unions with new sectoral panels that we've been calling for. So although I think we can be proud of our achievements as the union movement in saving jobs, and of course that's not just saving jobs through the job retention scheme, but the negotiations that I know are going on in workplaces across the country. I know every union right now is having to fight to save the jobs of their members. We can be proud of that, but we know there is a long, long way to go before we stave off the crisis of mass unemployment that we're all worried is coming down the line. Lastly, unions, of course, have been absolutely vital in making sure that people get the respect they deserve at work. This, I would say, we've been much more successful in the kind of workplace level than necessarily with government. One example I think was really clear was just that it was unions raising the alarm around the need for proper personal protective equipment. It took that workplace voice saying we're not getting what we need, it's not getting to workplaces, we're not being protected, to actually raise that. The lack of decent sick pay is something that unions have been campaigning for, and some real wins. Just this week we've seen an agreement with Four Seasons Healthcare, which is getting 15,000 workers back pay of their sick pay that they were deserved. And it's this kind of basic respect for workers' rights that we know unions are fighting for day in, day out. But I don't think we've got government to listen to us enough kind of in those areas yet. We're still seeing 2 million people excluded from sick pay. We're still seeing sick pay at a pretty paltry £96 a week, which we know isn't enough for many people to live on. But we know that out there across the country, unions are fighting for their members to get them the respect they deserve during this crisis. So I think the key challenge for us now is how we build on these gains. I think we have seen trade unions central to British political life in a way that they haven't been maybe for many years. We've seen people recognising what unions have done, and some early encouraging signs in the trade union membership figures that that's happening. But I don't think we've yet kind of got the agreement that from the top levels of government that unions actually have to be critical to designing the solution, and also the agreement that we are going to actually recognise what our key workers have done for us, what workers have done for us right throughout the pandemic. We know we need far more action. We know we still need a £10 minimum wage for everybody. We know we need that ban on 0 hours contracts, and we know we need many more people to be able to benefit from access to a trade union and collective bargaining, whether that's giving unions the right to access workplaces so they can tell people about what union membership could do for them, or the sectoral bargaining arrangements that we really need to be able to deliver decent terms and conditions across workplaces, and also to help co-design the kind of solutions that we need if we're going to be able to build that better. So we have seen real achievements in this crisis. Unions have, I think, played a massively important role in protecting workers, but our key challenge now is to build on that, to make sure that everybody has the right for a decent job and the new deal that workers really deserve. And I'm really looking forward to discussing that with you in the question and answer session.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kate. And I just want to make a couple of quick announcements before we introduce Simone. First of all, if you are wanting to tweet anything from this webinar, please feel free to do so. And the Twitter handle is #Organise 2020. Secondly, if you've got any Q&As, obviously feel free to send them in, and we'll try and get in as many as we possibly can. Just want to emphasize there, Kate explain what's been happening in the UK and mention trade union membership. I think it's important to recognize that this morning, Francis O'Grady, the General Secretary of the TUC, at the opening session of this event indicated that all the indications are that over 200,000 people have joined trade unions in the UK in the past year, which is no mean feat. And I think a lot of the work that we've got to do in representing our members is important to keep those numbers up and keep those people within the trade union movement. Now, our next speaker is our good friend Simone Marinelli. Simone is the trade union coordinator for FIOM-CGIL at Fiat, at Bosch, and other manufacturing companies in Italy. Has worked on the labour market regulation, negotiated company agreements on health and safety protocols, including the COVID-19 emergency. And he's represented agency and self-employed workers and signed agreements on their behalf at national level and with temporary and agency companies. So Simone, it's over to you. And I think you've set up, if we want, obviously the interpretation will come through for those colleagues who just press for Italian. And I know for our colleagues in Italy, you need to press, or it would come through on Russian. Simone, welcome to the webinar. Thank you very much for attending. I'm going to switch over to English.
Sì, grazie, intervengo in italiano. Grazie dell'invito e dell'opportunità che ci state dando, perché insomma diciamo che il lavoro che abbiamo messo in campo a partire dall'inizio della pandemia nel nostro paese ci ha coinvolto ovviamente in prima persona, sia come sindacato dei metalmeccanici e più in generale come movimento sindacale italiano, anche confederale, quindi diciamo a partire dalla CGIL, ma anche CISL e UIL, insomma ci siamo mossi in particolar modo ovviamente per la tutela dei lavoratori, della salute e sicurezza rispetto insomma a quello che la pandemia stava generando come problema soprattutto all'interno delle aziende. Quando è partita diciamo la crisi generata dal Covid, noi abbiamo avuto diciamo una prima fase in cui con i primi focolai il governo diciamo ha un po' tentennato nell'intervenire soprattutto nel mondo del lavoro, perché si è concentrato ovviamente nella fase emergenziale sulle questioni sanitarie e di diciamo chiusura di alcuni territori per evitare che poi la pandemia si espandesse su tutto il territorio italiano. Visto diciamo, questo periodo qui, abbiamo iniziato a partire dalle lotte dentro gli stabilimenti, per cui con scioperi, in particolar modo appunto nel mondo FCA, che poi ci hanno permesso di estenderli in diverse realtà, in particolar modo quelle metalmeccaniche, in un periodo di circa 2 settimane. Al seguito del quale, proprio per queste pressioni che appunto abbiamo coperto anche con una dichiarazione nazionale, fortunatamente di tipo unitaria, quindi anche con i colleghi di FIM e WILM sul settore metalmeccanico, alla fine insomma il governo ha deciso di incontrare le confederazioni e insieme cercare di concordare come si doveva intervenire per la tutela della salute e sicurezza dei lavoratori italiani. Questa pressione sul governo ci ha fatto arrivare poi a 2 importanti accordi di tipo generale confederale, quindi che riguardavano tutti i settori, proprio sulle linee guida di salute e sicurezza, che poi sono stati recepiti all'interno dei decreti che il governo stesso poi ha emanato nella fase di emergenza. Quindi diciamo sono diventati parte integrante dell'azione di governo che poi è stata messa in campo contro l'emergenza sanitaria. E le misure del governo sono state appunto demandate alle organizzazioni sindacali per quanto riguarda appunto la salute e sicurezza dei lavoratori sui posti di lavoro attraverso gli accordi tra le associazioni sindacali e le associazioni datoriali. E poi però c'è stata una fase di interlocuzione molto serrata con le organizzazioni sindacali sulle misure di sostegno al reddito e una misura molto importante che ci ha dato una mano in questo periodo, il blocco dei licenziamenti, che peraltro insomma diciamo che per il nostro ordinamento è stato un caso unico da quando insomma diciamo esiste la Repubblica Italiana, che peraltro ancora dura e sul quale noi stiamo facendo ulteriori pressioni politiche con il governo, perché questo blocco scade il 13 di agosto del prossimo mese, mentre noi richiediamo almeno, diciamo, una proroga fino a fine anno, con un pacchetto di ammortizzatori sociali, quindi di sostegno al reddito dei lavoratori, che ci permetterebbe in questa fase qui di rispondere anche alla crisi economica che la crisi Covid ovviamente si è portata dietro. Quindi dicevo, fatti gli accordi generali nazionali su salute e sicurezza, poi siamo intervenuti invece sui grandi gruppi, in particolar modo sul gruppo FCA, per due ragioni. Il primo che insomma, riguarda, diciamo, la scelta di FCA fatta ormai circa un decennio fa di uscire dal sistema di rappresentanza datoriale, quindi dall'associazione Confindustria, e poi ha portato all'individuazione di un contratto collettivo specifico di lavoro, che peraltro la FIOM non ha sottoscritto, e quindi, diciamo, noi da circa 10 anni eravamo fuori dal confronto aziendale, soprattutto sui temi specifici come organizzazione del lavoro, un po' meno sulla salute e sicurezza, perché quella è legge e, diciamo, in qualche maniera FCA ha dovuto riconoscere i rappresentanti dei lavoratori della sicurezza. E quindi in questa fase qui c'è stata, diciamo, un'inversione di tendenza, sia a livello governativo, perché appunto, diciamo, anche i precedenti governi non hanno più avuto interlocuzioni con le organizzazioni sindacali sul mercato del lavoro, sugli ammortizzatori sociali e su interventi di questo tipo. Ma c'è stata anche un'inversione di tendenza nel rapporto con il mondo FCA. Io per mondo FCA ovviamente intendo non solo la FCA, quindi la ex Fiat, ma anche tutte le aziende ad essa collegate, in particolar modo la CNH, nei quali appunto in entrambi i due gruppi abbiamo sottoscritto 2 accordi specifici che sono quasi uguali uno con l'altro. Dicevo un'inversione di tendenza perché in questa fase è stata la stessa FCA a ricontattare la FIOM e ad aprire un tavolo di confronto di livello nazionale di gruppo FCA, mettendo insieme tutte le sigle sindacali. E questo ci ha permesso appunto poi di arrivare ad un accordo collettivo nazionale unitario, quindi con la firma di tutte le organizzazioni sindacali presenti dentro quell'azienda, che ha stabilito appunto quali erano le misure di salute e sicurezza, in particolar modo per quanto riguardava la futura riapertura degli stabilimenti, perché noi eravamo in una fase in cui attraverso le nostre lotte siamo riusciti a chiuderli gli stabilimenti, ma il giorno stesso in cui siamo riusciti in questa operazione eravamo già proiettati a cercare, insomma, di trovare la modalità di far lavorare in sicurezza i lavoratori e proiettati appunto alla riapertura. E vi dico, insomma, rispetto a questa dinamica qui, noi abbiamo lavorato su 2 fronti, in prospettiva appunto per la riapertura degli stabilimenti in totale sicurezza, ma anche, qui un altro caso di inversione di tendenza, attraverso un accordo che ha esteso i permessi sindacali, quindi le ore, ai rappresentanti sindacali della FIOM, che appunto non avevano, in quanto noi non siamo firmatari del contratto specifico di lavoro della FCA. Quindi, insomma, diciamo che l'azione che abbiamo messo in campo attraverso le lotte ci ha portato 2 grandissimi risultati. Ora, in questo momento, ovviamente, la nostra azione prosegue più generale rispetto al governo, perché notiamo purtroppo, come dire, un po' di calo di attenzione rispetto al mondo del lavoro. E tra l'altro, insomma, la crisi Covid ha portato nel mondo metalmeccanico una crisi economica molto molto pesante, per cui stiamo chiedendo a gran voce, in particolare su alcuni settori come il siderurgico e l'automotive, di aprire dei tavoli specifici, perché insomma abbiamo bisogno di stabilire delle politiche industriali di paese. Dopodiché, insomma, diciamo, i protocolli stanno andando avanti, hanno dato un buonissimo risultato, ma diciamo che la crisi economica ci ha anche aiutato, dobbiamo essere onesti da questo punto di vista, perché laddove si è riusciti a far ripartire gli stabilimenti, a parte in un caso che è lo stabilimento della Sevel, che produce con una joint venture insieme a PSA veicoli commerciali leggeri, e gli altri stabilimenti di FCA stanno riaprendo, ma in maniera molto molto rallentata, ovviamente dovuto al fatto che il mercato delle immatricolazioni, in particolare in Italia, insomma, è praticamente in stallo. E quindi, diciamo, questo ha permesso poi di far rientrare in minima parte i lavoratori e farli rientrare, diciamo, con misure di sicurezza, senza avere, diciamo, grossi problemi di gestione degli accordi che abbiamo stipulato. Ma anche laddove il caso della Sevel invece si è ripartiti quasi subito con una produzione abbastanza a ranghi forzati, insomma abbiamo visto che il protocollo ha risposto abbastanza bene. Tra l'altro ora ci troviamo in una condizione un po' paradossale, perché noi abbiamo creato dentro le aziende una situazione in cui diciamo, gli accordi hanno stabilito un alto livello di salute e sicurezza con l'utilizzo di alcune cose, poi magari ci entrerò più tardi nello specifico. E quindi abbiamo la situazione paradossale in cui nelle aziende in cui noi siamo riusciti a intervenire, a fare gli accordi, il livello di salute e sicurezza è altissimo, ma al di fuori di quelle aziende invece notiamo un comportamento, diciamo, generale e collettivo anche da parte delle istituzioni, e che si è un po' abbassata, insomma, diciamo, il livello di attenzione rispetto a quello, insomma, che è il Covid, per cui ora abbiamo il problema inverso, dove i lavoratori non riescono a comprendere perché dentro lo stabilimento devono sottostare a misure abbastanza forti di utilizzo dei DPI, di distanziamento sociale ed altre cose, mentre poi all'esterno, insomma, abbiamo casi in cui spiagge sono affollate, insomma, ci sono state manifestazioni, eccetera, eccetera. E quindi ci troviamo in questa fase a gestire anche queste due dinamiche. Ripeto, insomma, il rapporto col governo sta andando avanti, rispetto a prima forse abbiamo qualche problema in più di farci ascoltare, ma in questa fase appunto, diciamo, il governo è più concentrato sul rilancio del paese, ma lo sta facendo senza ascoltare le organizzazioni sindacali. E quindi, insomma, anche a livello più generale, CGIL in particolare, insomma, ha quasi dato un ultimatum al governo, perché, insomma, pochi giorni fa il nostro segretario generale Maurizio Landini, insomma, ha fatto capire che se o il governo riconvoca le organizzazioni sindacali o siamo anche arrivati al punto in cui probabilmente dovremo scendere in piazza per farci ascoltare. Detto ciò, però, insomma, diciamo, la gestione dei mesi in cui la pandemia ha aggredito il nostro paese, insomma, è stata con il rapporto con il governo a ritmo serrato, e appunto, lo ripeto ancora, c'è stata un'inversione di tendenza anche rispetto a quello del ruolo in cui erano state relegate le organizzazioni sindacali precedentemente dai governi precedenti. Un altro appunto lo faccio invece su quello che ha messo in campo l'associazione datoriale, la Confindustria, perché proprio nel momento in cui il Covid ha iniziato ad espandersi nel paese e attraverso le nostre lotte noi stavamo cercando di far chiudere le fabbriche, gli stabilimenti e i posti di lavoro per tutelare la salute e sicurezza delle persone, Confindustria ha iniziato un attacco frontale, intanto molto duro nei confronti del governo. Successivamente alla contrattazione nazionale, e dicendo, insomma, che quello era un sistema che non poteva più esistere, tutt'al più che serviva, insomma, un sistema molto più leggero per far ripartire l'economia, e quindi mettendo, diciamo, come dire, sotto accusa il sistema della contrattazione nazionale. E poi ovviamente i sindacati additandoci come, diciamo, quelli che stavano bloccando la ripartenza del paese, perché appunto stavamo chiedendo invece maggiore salute e sicurezza sul posto di lavoro. Quindi questa è la situazione, insomma, che ci siamo trovati durante l'epidemia, e che attraverso le lotte, gli scioperi dei lavoratori e delle lavoratrici, che in alcuni casi sono anche partiti, diciamo, spontanei, e poi siamo riusciti a dargli una copertura anche con una dichiarazione di sciopero nazionale in Italia. Però, insomma, è stato un lavoro che ci ha coinvolto in prima persona, ovviamente un lavoro collettivo, perché è chiaro, insomma, che ognuno dei nostri compagni e funzionari è stato diciamo, coinvolto, ma appunto anche un lavoro di relazione continua con le rappresentanze interne. Ultima cosa, e poi finisco, proprio sulle relazioni e i rapporti tra noi, le rappresentanze dei lavoratori. Noi, diciamo, stiamo in un momento in cui stiamo un po' soffrendo il fatto che non in tutte le realtà diciamo, possiamo fare le assemblee e quindi rientrare nelle fabbriche come organizzazioni sindacali. Ovviamente abbiamo, diciamo, sostituito le riunioni in presenza attraverso appunto l'utilizzo di questi sistemi che sono stati assolutamente utilissimi durante la fase di crisi, ma che insomma in qualche modo come dire, ha un po' affievolito la relazione personale, no, tra noi rappresentanti sindacali dentro le aziende. Quindi stiamo lavorando proprio in queste settimane per cercare di avere maggiore agibilità dentro l'azienda, ovviamente tenuto conto delle misure di salute e sicurezza che chiaramente coinvolgono tutto il sindacato e chiaramente coinvolge anche chi, come i nostri funzionari, entrano nelle varie aziende per andare a fare le assemblee. Grazie.
Simone, thank you very, very much for that excellent contribution. Comrades, I've not heard whether Keith Jacobs is going to be able to join us. I've not heard whether Keith is going to be able to join us, but we have had quite a lot of questions come in, and I'm going to just put them into two groups. So there is one for Simone, and that is, have the Italian unions managed to recruit more members during the COVID crisis in the same way that we have in the UK? But there are some specific ones from the UK that I'm going to just cover in three. There is a question from Simon Tilley about local government association refusing to fight for staff pay increases above 2.75%. And the question in general terms, without reading all of Simon's excellent statement, is should we do more to win parity between various sectors, particularly in the NHS and local authorities, as one cannot work without the other, and are equally at risk from the virus. Secondly, as a question from Kerry Breyer, asking how do we work better and collaborate, more collaboration between our unions going forward. And there's another good question from Ronald Mendel, again about the recovery package announced yesterday by the Chancellor, which doesn't include wage increases for frontline NHF and care staff. And so, as the question is always to trade unions in Great Britain, is what is the TUC doing about it, and how are we going to put pressure on the government to make this a priority? And I think if Kate kicks off with the UK ones, and then Simone, if you can answer, have you recruited more members? And then I'll take some more before we close. And hopefully Keith Jacobs may just join us from South Africa. Kate, over to you.
All right, thanks, Tony. And it was really great to get to listen to Simone. And just before I start answering the questions, one thing that really struck me was just what a difference having industry level bargaining agreement make, and just how much greater that gives unions negotiating power in their negotiations. And it's just a reminder of why we're arguing for that in the UK. So to take the questions about kind of the public sector unions and key workers, well, obviously it always sounds kind of grim to say, you know, there's an opportunity when it's kind of coming out of tragedy here, but as never before, we have seen the contribution of public sector workers, of key workers, workers in social care, workers in the NHS, workers in local government, to dealing with this crisis and really being on the front end of responding to the terrible effects. And I think, you know, there have been many, many people saying, let's not just clap for carers, let's give them a pay rise. How do we actually achieve that together? I think there is something really important about making sure we're not picking off particular groups as being seen as the deserving workers. So just a pay rise for NHS workers or just a pay rise for local government workers. And I know that the TUC runs a public sector liaison group, and they are starting to think through what is the strategy for winning that pay rise for key workers right across the economy. One of the things the Chancellor announced yesterday was, well, first there was pretty much nothing for the public sector, but also he said there is going to be a spending review and alongside the budget, and I guess we're expecting that, he said autumn, which normally means any time between August and December in kind of government speak, but we are expecting that big set piece announcement, and that's obviously what we'll be working towards. I think there's an interesting question I spotted in the chat as well about campaigning techniques during the crisis, and I'd be really interested to get Simone's take on that too. You know, what can you do when it's harder to go on strike, it's harder to do a mass demonstration. But I think we have kind of seen the power of social media into sometimes shaming either companies or indeed government to act. We saw that in government's U-turn over extending free school meal provision during the summer. So I think it's a huge joint challenge to us as unions, to us as the TUC as well, to see how we can put all our campaigning power behind getting that proper pay rise for all our key workers.
Thank you. Simone, could you answer the question that we've had in as to whether Italian unions have increased union membership during the crisis in the way that other countries have?
Guardate, purtroppo il dato, diciamo, del tesseramento lo stiamo verificando proprio in questi giorni. Stiamo notando un aumento delle iscrizioni, però non posso darvi il dato numerico. Ma in realtà noi temevamo più una perdita dall'inizio della crisi. Considerate che l'impatto della crisi Covid e della crisi economica è stato abbastanza pesante, soprattutto sui salari dei lavoratori, perché è vero che al momento, diciamo, non abbiamo perso posti di lavoro per effetto del blocco dei licenziamenti, ma ovviamente abbiamo interi settori che sono in cassa integrazione, quindi sotto ammortizzatore sociale, con in alcuni casi una perdita di salario abbastanza pesante sui lavoratori. Quindi è ovvio che vedendo, quando abbiamo iniziato, insomma, a vedere gli effetti della crisi Covid, noi eravamo, diciamo, pensavamo più a una perdita di iscritti invece che di aumentarli. Ora, il dato positivo è che sicuramente non li abbiamo persi, e in alcune aziende invece abbiamo notato, insomma, che anche grazie al nostro intervento abbiamo messo in campo persone che, diciamo, ci guardavano, ma ci guardavano dall'esterno, invece ci hanno avvicinato per iscriversi al sindacato.
That's very, very good news.
Tony, can I ask
Yes?
Simone? Can we ask Simone the question about organising
campaigning
in social distancing? Because I'd really like to hear the experience of the Italian unions there.
Yeah, there's a question about that. I was messing around with the buttons here. There's another question for both Kate and for Simone, and that is about the various techniques that have been used digitally to put pressure on employers, and also what have we been doing in order to have some impact on employers on that. And if you can, and Kate obviously touched on this before, but Simone, we're interested in what is happening in Italy as well, and also from Kate as to the impact of digital campaigning to organise workers and get the message over during the crisis. Do you want to, Simone, do you want to answer, and then Kate?
Sì, allora guardate, noi il 25 di giugno abbiamo anche fatto una manifestazione nazionale in piazza, organizzata ovviamente rispettando il distanziamento sociale. Per far ciò, per la prima volta nella nostra storia, credo, abbiamo, diciamo, riempito la piazza di sedie, ovviamente distanziando, insomma, le persone a meno 1 metro di distanza una dall'altra. Era una manifestazione nazionale, ci siamo ovviamente autolimitati nel portare le persone da tutta Italia a Roma, perché l'abbiamo fatta a Roma, ma insomma ha avuto un grande risalto anche dal punto di vista mediatico ed è stata, insomma, organizzata sicuramente in modo ottimale. come per esempio stiamo organizzando appunto il ritorno dentro i luoghi di lavoro con le assemblee, e ieri per esempio abbiamo fatto lo sciopero con manifestazione presso uno stabilimento CNH a Brescia. È complicato, ma insomma stiamo tentando, diciamo che qui ci danno una mano i lavoratori, perché gli stessi sanno insomma che possiamo fare le azioni sindacali, ma possiamo farle rispettando il distanziamento sociale, se non vogliamo avere problemi sia, diciamo, rispetto ad attacchi mediatici, sia anche ovviamente di salute e sicurezza di tutti quanti. Come abbiamo, allora, noi durante la fase insomma di crisi, quella più acuta, abbiamo impostato una campagna mediatica molto molto serrata, anche e soprattutto nei confronti delle aziende e soprattutto delle associazioni datoriali, che appunto stavano facendo pressioni per non chiudere. E questo ci ha permesso di avere una grossa visibilità a livello di media, sia a livello insomma di social media, sia a livello anche di radio e televisione. E per cui insomma abbiamo praticamente vissuto un periodo di settimane in cui la FIOM era costantemente invitata ai dibattiti che si facevano sulle varie trasmissioni televisive, e quindi abbiamo avuto l'opportunità non solo insomma di portare la nostra visione e far emergere la lotta che stava dentro gli stabilimenti, ma anche in qualche caso di, come dire, attaccare direttamente aziende e Confindustria che invece stavano facendo pressioni per non chiudere e appunto per non dare sicurezza ai lavoratori.
Thank you, Simone. Kate, do you want to add anything to that before we take the next questions?
I think it's just interesting the extent to which companies have felt under pressure kind of by social media and other media during this crisis. Lots of people will have seen the attention on the warehouses in Leicester where there's been outbreaks of COVID, and the role of kind of fast fashion suppliers like Boohoo in pushing down terms and conditions in those warehouses. And I think it's interesting, anyone who's been kind of following that debate for the last years has known that there has been a long-term problem with conditions in those factories, in those textile manufacturing warehouses. But up till now, it's been hard for that really to get the attention it deserves. But I think there's something about this crisis where people have realised more, just, as I said, you know, the importance of workers on the front line, about who's actually packing their food, sewing their clothes, making sure the streets are kept clean. That does mean there's an opportunity for us to really call out employers who are getting it wrong. And I think, you know, we're still learning about the best creative ways to do that on social media. And I've put in the chat link a link because there's many sessions on that during Organise. But I do think it's an opportunity for us to really be putting that kind of social pressure on employers, as well as our more typical industrial ways of organising too.
Thanks very much, Kate. I think it's important as well that we recognise the point that Kate has made there. In the UK, it's amazing that the government has woken up to the fact that there are such things as sweatshops in areas like Leicester, where the coronavirus has broken out again, where the owners of these textile companies and others have not abided by the rules, and of course forced people to work in those conditions. And also I find it interesting to note that some politicians on TV have discovered there's such a thing as 0 hours contracts, and isn't it shocking? So I think it has woken up people, and the social media have played a part in that. Now I've got one question here from Mary Harvey, and it's to do with the TUC Retired Members Conference in October. Mary, all I can say is I can't give you an answer to that, whether it's going ahead. I can tell you about the Congress itself, which is slightly different. You'll have to contact the TUC to find out details about what's happening in that regard. Colleagues, is there any further Q&As that anybody's got for Simone or from Kate? It's a pity that Keith Jacobs couldn't join us. I will try and contact him later on, because I know he's a big Manchester United fan. I'll be watching the game tonight if he can get TV. Colleagues, is there any other questions or comment for Kate or Simone? No? Okay, well, first of all, can I thank you, Simone, for taking part in this webinar. It's really good of you. And my good friend Valentina there from the union as well. It's good to see you. We're good friends in industrial. And for Kate to give us some very detailed answers to what we've been doing in the UK. To plug TUC Organise 2020, there are seminars, webinars going on today and tomorrow and over the weekend. It's a great event. There's lots of people joining. Just to let you know, the total number for this event who actually joined was 60 over a lunch period. That's not too bad, and it's good. It's good that so many folks have joined, not just from the UK but from outside of the UK as well. Keep well, keep safe, and I wish you all the best for the future. Thank you very much for your input. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, Tony. Ciao,
Bye.
Simone. Thanks, everyone.
Grazie tutti.
Hi, thank you.
Grazie.
Grazie.
Ciao.
Okay, I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else.
Chiudiamo, camera.